Greetings, fellow scribes! Welcome back to the archive. This week, I continue my series on the Archons and Death Angels of Kult Divinity Lost by talking about Netzach, the Archon of Victory, and Hareb-Serap, the Death Angel of Conflict. These two are probably the closest to each other of any of the Archon Death Angel pairs. Like, literally, you have to look closely to see the distinction between them. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy as I talk about Netzach and Hareb-Serap. The Roman general marches down the Via Appia in his triumph, the crowds cheering riotously at his glory. The Confederate general hands his saber to the Union general as an act of surrender. The ticker tape parades and jubilation in Times Square as troops finally get to come home from World War II. These are the hallmarks of Netzach. Netzach was a general for the Demiurge's armies, and as such, he considers himself to be the logical replacement for the missing Demiurge. His principle is victory, and he seeks this victory not through sports challenges, but through conquest. Wherever armies march to take territory, wherever armies fight each other and one must lose to the other, that is where you're going to find Netzach's greatest influence. Netzach is strongest, of course, among national militaries, but he is also strong among groups like guerrilla fighters, mercenaries, and state-sponsored terrorists. He represents the urge to seize what is out there and expand your territory, or to push your ideology further. One of the symbols associated with Netzach is a U.S. flag with 54 stars, meaning the U.S. expanding. How does he keep people trapped in the lie? The jubilation of victory. Every instance where his influence is felt strongest, especially after events like World War II or during the Roman Empire, his influence spreads through the celebrations of the victories. And this keeps people trapped in the lie because they start looking not at what's around them, not looking and poking and prodding at the prison that holds them, but instead they're looking for the next triumph, the next victory, the next conflict that they're going to be engaged in, planning to make sure that that next conflict will lead to a victory for them. So he keeps people trapped by keeping them focused in a martial terrain, martial area. And he strives to increase his power. Right now, he's strongest in the United States and Israel. He's starting to grow in China and Russia. Not quite where he wants to be yet, but he's still one of the strongest of the Archons, just because of how much military influence there is in the world. of course, without his shadow, without his Death Angel counterpart, who he still sees as an enemy, he wouldn't necessarily have those victories he wishes. Because you cannot have victory without conflict. So Netzach is not able to really do his purpose without his counterpart, Hareb-Serap. The knights charge into the village, and they put everyone, man, woman, and child, to the sword. Because the Pope said God will sort out the good Christians. The Melee Massacre, the Kent State Massacre, a riot in an inner city. Where you see these things, these are where the touch of HarebSerap has reached. You see him not just in the military conflicts, not just in the riots. You see him anywhere where a spark of disagreement can be fanned into a bonfire of atrocity. You see him in the bully being beaten by several other students. You see him in the husband and wife having a disagreement that turns into an argument, and next thing you know, 5 people are dead. Because he is the drive for conflict. Where he touches, Inferno follows in his wake. For, like several other of the Death Angels, he's not concerned about keeping humanity trapped in the prison. He's concerned about changing humanity's prison to Inferno. To dragging humanity from our paradise of Elysium into the Death Angels' special little hell. He is where diplomacy fails. He is where prejudice and anger turn to violence. Because he does not want people to get along. He wants people in conflict, to start fighting, to start killing. He is the Raven of the battlefield, and in these modern days, he grows fat indeed. And that is really the essence of HarebSerap. He is conflict. He is not the drive for conquest and victory like Netzach represents. He is the raw, all-consuming fire of conflict itself. And without him, Netzach would not have a reason to exist. Unlike all the other Archon Death Angel pairs, Netzach and HarebSerap would have no power without the other. Without conflict, there would be no drive for conquest and victory. There would be nothing to defeat without conflict. But without the hope of victory, conflicts would not escalate. without the drive to conquest, to drive your enemies into submission, there would be no reason for a conflict to go to a war, or to a murder, or to a death camp. And without these two, without each other, Netzach and HarebSerap would not have what is needed to function. Which is funny because Netzach inherently hates HarebSerap simply because HarebSerap is a Death Angel. And this is pretty much the essence of these two entities. Which, it's kind of funny, because Netzach hates HarebSerap simply because HarebSerap is a Death Angel. So, HarebSerap's conflict principle is binding the two against each other. And yet, Netzach's relationship to HarebSerap is the seeking to conquer and achieve victory over HarebSerap. So their principles are directly working on each other in their own ways. But next week, I will be talking about the Archon of Honor, Had, and the Death Angel of Vengeance, Samael. So until then, I'd like you all to remember to have fun and keep gaming.